Hi, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everyone. My name is Prasad Adavatkar. I'm an Associate Vice President at Indigene for Business Solutions. Welcome to our panel discussion today. Today, we are going to discuss the applications of AI and related technologies in accelerating product launches. So, it's an exciting time in our industry with 250 plus products expected to launch over the period of next 3 to 5 years. Pharma companies of all sizes, large, medium, and small, are gearing up to ensure that their launch are very, very successful, paving the pathway to gain of several $100,000 to several $1 million throughout the product life cycle. But what's the critical ingredients and what's the critical success factors for those products? There are three things that come to our mind based on the research and based on all the insights. Number one is really nailing the launch strategy and in the right timing for the launch. Number two is making sure that the product revenues and gain share of market is absolutely important and absolutely critical in the first 12 months of the product launch. So making sure that the significant market share is gained during that initial 6 to 12 months, which has a long lasting impact on the product revenue or the launch life cycle. And number three is ensuring that there is a execution flawlessly before and after the product launch, specifically T minus 12 to T plus 12 timeframe. But what's the winning formula? What's the secret sauce out here? Is there one, right? To discuss those aspects and making sure that we understand the nuances and efficacy of analytics, advanced analytics, AI, and machine learning in this entire process to ensure that those launches are successful. So, for that, I'm here along with our esteemed panelist of industry experts and people around the industry. Please join me in welcoming our panel. My first panelist here is David Salman. Welcome, David. Welcome to the panel. David is a global head of commercial digital strategy and enablement at AstraZeneca. My second panelist is Saket Malhotra, who's the head of commercial information management and enablement at Ipsen. And my other panelist is Sam Ghosh, who's the executive director and head of commercial analytics at Otsuka. Thank you, panelists. Thank you for being here today and most welcome. I'm looking forward to a very insightful conversation on this very important topic. Along with that, I would request Sam to address the first question, and then other panelists are most welcome to share their point of view and perspectives and experiences along with that, right? So my first question is going to be over to Sam. So my first question is, from your vantage point, Sam, what's the current state and what is the use of analytics and data in an end-to-end product lifecycle, specifically focusing around T minus 12 to T plus 12 timeframe?
So thanks, Prasad. So before I start, I need to read out this disclaimer of like what I'm presenting represents my own views and opinions. I am not representing or speaking on behalf of Otsuka America Pharmaceutical Inc., Otsuka Pharmaceutical Development and Commercialization Inc., Otsuka America Inc., or its affiliates. Saying that, let's address the question. So analytics is playing an increasingly crucial and effective role in product launch lifecycle. All the crucial launch strategy decisions, creation, ideation, and implementation is enabled by a number of analytical work streams, which are initiated during different points of the launch timeline. In a nutshell, analytics occupies a pivotal space in the launch excellence playbook used by companies across the pharma industry.
That's a great perspective.
If I may add to Sam, so he's right. The use of data and analytics is becoming very critical across pre and post launch activities. from understanding the market all the way down to tracking your business performance, your brand performance, thinking from commercial and medical standpoint. However, the use can vary depending on your go-to-market model, maturity of the company, launch size, and complexity of the market will drive a lot of these tactics across data and analytics. From my experience, primary and secondary data sources are often used in combination, depending on the availability of data, of course. And companies can build these insights in-house or purchase these insights from third-party data providers or vendor partners. And these insights can be used to understand the market landscape, trends, and serve as the inputs to support your marketing and brand strategies.
I'd agree with both points. The only thing I think I'd add is that when you think about what has to be done, especially pre-launch, if you're starting at L minus 36 to 24 and forward, you've got several major things that you've got to do, and analytics plays a role in every single one of them. Now, you've got established clinical value. You've got to anchor. You've got to anchor for specific ecosystem elements such as diagnostics and market access. You have to build your team and your resource allocation efforts, and you've got to begin to equip your medical teams for the pre-launch work, as well as starting all of the work that's got to be done, and oftentimes has to be changed to the last minute. Around your launch itself. So all of those key areas requires analytics, and it requires good investment in data, clear strategy around your data investment and your investment in analytics talent. I'd say that regardless of which angle you come from, one of the very first things I've done in my career when standing up a team moving into an organization that needs to move forward is pay attention to the hiring of the analytics talent. You start with that, and then you build from that, and you have the capacity to actually start to justify the need for everything else. So
that's a great perspective, David, and all of you. So one more question that is related to this one is, I think it's very clear that the need for data and advanced analytics, there is no doubt about it, right? I mean, of course, in the launch life cycle, it is required. But does it happen in a planned, methodical way today, or it kind of happen in a more on a need basis or in a sporadic? Is there a structured process in the industry, or based on your experience and your vantage point that you have seen? Does that exist today, or there is a more room to be, we need to get better at it as an industry?
So Prasad, from my experience, analytics is often or should be engaged in the early stages of pre-launch planning and the commercialization process. And it becomes more important if you're talking about the acquisition, where you need to be even engaged earlier than the closing the deal as part of business development processes. And the reason we need to be engaged or engaging the analytics team in advance is to develop the understanding of the market or the indication, and define the whole roadmap specifically around market understanding, size of the market, what is the opportunity, competitive landscape, and then define your target customers. The next area analytics is used is defining the field force structure. So once you understand the size of the market, you need to define the field force sizing to support the launch sequencing. This includes establishing territories, the alignments for field teams, so that we can balance the workload on the field teams, focus on our targets. And the third area I would say is very critical is defining the performance tracking indicators, both uh, from pre and post launch KPIs, and also the ongoing measurement of your brand and team performance.
Yeah, so I think this is something that the panelists kind of mentioned is like ideally the analytics team should get involved as early as T minus 36, but no later than T minus 18 from the possible launch date. And of course, it does vary across companies and is dependent on the specific needs of the launch process dictated by the therapy area, product profile, competitive landscape, etc. And there are a lot of areas where the analytics team is called on to support, including establishing the forecast. As Saket talked about, like creating the KPIs, and for each KPI, you need to have the goals. And for the goals, like you definitely need to have the forecast kind of established for the product launch. Understanding the treatment dynamics of patients in the specific therapeutic area, identifying the KOLs, the valuing of HCPs, establishing the messaging arc of the launch products suitably customized for the various HCPs, the patients, as well as the caregiver profile. So all of that kind of is required by the analytics team to do, and all of these work streams has to be established and implemented over the course of that launch prep process.
And
Great,
Prasad,
great
if I may
perspective.
add one other point to Sam's point, when you're thinking of engaging the analytics team, you should think across medical and commercial, for example, cross-functional, and include your market access teams. Very important to think and have a very clear strategy as part of pre-launch, like a launch minus 18 to 36 months is very important so that you understand the market potential, the dynamics of your patient behaviors and outcomes going all the way to commercializing the products are becoming very important. So as companies are forming the analytics team, they can have analytics very focused on business outcome or the KPIs, but there should be a clear alignment across medical because medical plays a very critical role in defining the market potential, your market basket, what indications to include, what are the molecules, and some of the clinical data is very important to support your launch sequencing.
That's a great point.
Typically medical is typically the repository of ethnographic understanding, whether you call it that or not, of your customers that you just don't have anywhere else in the organization. And so if they're not closely engaged with analytics in the early stages of market and stakeholder insight generation, then you will miss something critical in your launch planning.
Great perspective, everyone. So I think to summarize, there are three, key areas or three big use cases that are emerging out from this conversation. Number one is Saket, you talked about the sales sizing and forecasting, right? And Sam also you touched upon sales forecasting and making sure that you have the right field team, right size field team with the right territory, with the right alignment on the ground to be able to, hit the ground running and execute, right? That's number one. And even 3 months before that for the KOL engagement and so on. Second thing is about the patient, right? I think, Sam, you touched upon the patient engagement, understanding the patient, understanding those, areas and journeys, and then devising the plan to, early engage the patient population. That's two. And number three, I think, David, you brought up a great point about both market access as well as the medical team, right? Engaging the medical team, engaging the set of stakeholders. And again, medical is not just about understanding the patient dynamics and patient population and the treatment pathways, but it also includes the payer dynamics, also understanding the payers, also their pricing dynamics and so on. So those are, I think, critical pre-launch use cases, if you will, or critical moments in truth in that critical product launch life cycle that are emerging out. So With that, let's dive a little bit deeper into forecasting area, if I may, or patient area, right? So Sam, from your perspective, what are some of the key things or key capabilities um, are essential in driving those two areas? And you can go in terms of data, in terms of the whole data stack, in terms of the analytical models, and so on and so forth, right? So what are those critical capabilities that are required in driving the pre-launch preparations?
Yeah, so from a forecasting perspective, I think understanding the patient population, the potential patient population is key, one. Second is from a clinical trial data perspective, you get to kind of analyze the data to understand the target patient profile as well. So the target patient profile can become an input into doing a demand study work, which will then become an input into your forecasting work. The other piece is to kind of understand the patient treatment journey within the therapeutic area that you are focused on, and then basically build the profile of the patient that your product is treating. And then what you can do is that if diagnosis of patients is becoming an issue, and especially its case in most of the rare disease products, you want to kind of get that patient profile built and do some sort of like a lookalike patient model, and going into the AI piece of it, and then figure out what's that pool of potential undiagnosed population that is out there which your product can treat. And then that becomes an input into your forecasting model. Also understanding, like in terms of the lines of therapy, as to how your product might be utilized in the treatment of patients across various different lines of therapy. So all of these basically then becomes crucial inputs into the bigger forecasting model that you're building to establish the forecast of your product, and bringing in all the different facets of patient dynamics into the mix.
Awesome. Any thoughts, David or Saket, on that?
So Prasad, so I'm fully aligned with Sam. As you're defining the forecasting model, there are several factors that goes into the model, starting from understanding your market potential, your number of patients, your sales, and other internal factors, right? But one of the challenges we all are facing in pharma is the coverage, because you don't have like 70-80% coverage in many of these markets. And when you go into rare disease like ultra rare, uh, patients are becoming finding these patients are becoming very critical. And there are many tactics out there to predict the patient population based on several criteria like patient outcomes, and define your market sizing. And once you understand the market sizing, the potential of the market, you can take those inputs as part of defining your forecasting model, along with other criteria like line of therapy, or what is the duration of therapy. And what you see from the clinical studies are very different from the real world data. And that is where, as you're defining the forecasting model based on the pattern you use, it's important for you to bring clinical studies outcome, but also look from the real world data or claims and other data set, bringing them together, use AI machine learning to build that predictive model, size the market potential, number of patients, and then push that into your forecasting model as part of pre-launch activities. And as you go closer to the launch, refreshing that model to have 3 to 5 years forecast is becoming very important.
I completely agree with that. I think that's really gets to the core of the topic here. Well, because a lot of these, look, we've been doing some version of this now for decades. Analytics has played a part in launch strategies, at least for the companies that are successful for this time. the sheer number of man hours that have been applied to thinking about this and solving pre-launch, everything from from basic market sizing down to segmentation. We've mastered that insofar as it can be mastered with the tools that we've had at our disposal in the past. The key now is the tools are changing, and we have to change the thinking about the capabilities of what we can build from that. That's the real trick here, because if we continue to think of this as sizing how many people fit in the stadium versus realizing that the technical capacity now allows us to define who's going to be sitting in section 2E and whether they're going to actually show up on the day or not. That level of precision enables us to not only, again, think about our pricing and market access models. It empowers us to think with a high degree of granularity about where we're going to be putting sales and medical field teams, and where we're going to be applying our promotional resources. But it also enables us to think in terms of modeling the impact on these populations of the increasing complexity in our space as well. We're not just talking about single indication, single therapy frameworks anymore. We're talking about combination therapies. We're talking about an environment in which precision medicine is potentially turning a blockbuster drug into a drug that's actually serving 100,000 different patient cohorts. So this level of complexity has to be built into the launch planning as well. Otherwise, we are going to face continued challenges on pricing and on demonstration of value delivery and on all of the other things that we're already under the gun for. This is one of the tools that we have to start to do a better job of that value demonstration.
Completely agree.
We have to start thinking not just about what problems we have to solve, but about how the tools can be used differently from how we've used them in the past.
Yes.
A great perspective. So one of the things that we always hear and constantly hear from the industry is KOLs, right? And I'm not just talking about the national KOLs, but also understanding the local KOLs or local opinion leaders, which are critical and very, very important for success of any products, right? So what's your take on that, and how and where AI can be utilized, really identifying the KOLs as well as the local KOLs and linking them together? What are the different ways, means, and techniques that AI can bring to the table for product launches?
So in order to identify and profile KOLs, like several critical metrics, like such as like HCP's like research influence, their clinical influence, their digital influence, their industry engagement, their leadership engagement has to be kind of generated, which can then be utilized to build ML models, such as like you can build a network model, you can build influence models, you can understand the degree of connections, you can build like NLP models, like understanding the topics that they're interested in, the social media influence models as well. And by conducting all of these these different work streams, one can kind of identify the KOLs as basically, are they national level KOLs? Are they regional KOLs? Are they emerging experts? Or even by influence? Like, is there influence kind of in the clinical domain, in the community, within the digital space, and also understanding like their attitude and behavior towards the therapy area and the product in question. And these are crucial insights, right? Like, because we need to, Ms. Saket, you talked about like the importance of like the MSL teams and the medical affairs teams. And like, it's crucial to enable like the medical field resource optimizations and doing KOL profiling, KOL engagement strategy, congress planning, and then orchestrations of peer-to-peer program strategies such as advisory boards and speaker selection, as well as basically influencing your digital campaign strategy as well. So in a sense, there is definitely a big role that machine learning models play with to identify the KOLs, and then subsequently all the downstream strategies linked to that can be implemented.
Just to
It's
add to
very,
that,
very.
Prasad, I think AI is more important in the medical KOL setting as compared to commercial, because when we are dealing with or looking at the insights on KOLs or thought leaders, traditional analytics may not support to the full potential. For example, um, you need to bring basic information like activities, practice size, your publications, your trials, very different data assets together to understand the behaviors of these KOLs or the preferences of these KOLs before you define their their engagement tactics and what content you want to share through your MSL and other channels or field reps are very important. And some of these data sources are all over the place in the social media, but how you can leverage some of these advanced techniques like AI, machine learning are important to bring different data sources together, understand how to do the web crawling and some other techniques to find the 360 view of your KOLs as part of your strategy to support the launch, but also ongoing brand and medical tactics.
Thoughts, David, on?
I was just thinking, I mean, it's we've had the pieces to a lot of this for a while now, right? Sentiment analysis, KOL network analyses. We've been paying large external entities, of millions of dollars to build these kinds of assessments for us, to identify these networks for us. The value here is exactly in what he's just said, and that is we're no longer at the mercy of these well curated data sets that are owned by a few intermediaries. The tools that are at our disposal now allow us to, number one, go across large sets of data, in heterogeneous places with highly variable quality sets, like quality parameters to them, free text, structured, etc., and to pull it together and more importantly, do a level of pattern recognition and analysis that, quite frankly, is more sophisticated than anything we've ever had at our disposal. And it's not just about identifying the networks, identifying sentiment, and actually, micro segmenting them around this. But now it's actually about even being able to predict response to particular topics and messaging. It's about the capacity to even look at prescribing behavior, at data sets in their, within practice over the past 30, 60, 90 days, and not only predict what, how they're going to respond therapeutically, but also predict what kinds of cases they're likely to see in the next 5, 10, 15, 30 days. And therefore, what kind of medical guidance and support is ideally targeted into that practice at this moment in time to support best possible standard of care. And that's where the value of this stuff is. I mean, and that's why the investment is worth it.
Yeah, Prasad, the other thing I'm seeing is the question is around KOLs, but many innovative companies are thinking of bringing KOLs and your commercial customers together, because these KOLs can be your customers from the commercial standpoint. So as you're defining and trying to understand the behaviors, the preferences of these KOLs or your customers, you need to think across medical and commercial to be very effective as part of defining your customer journeys. And your customer can be HCP, they can be your KOLs, or they can be your peers in many cases, because the whole industry is transforming, becoming more dynamic. And this is where the technology like AI, machine learning, Gen AI are becoming very critical to understand the behaviors and define the right engagement tactics, the messages to your external partners.
So, I mean, great insight. So, three takeaways from this particular segment that I can, voice over. Number one is really understanding the HCP profiles at a much deeper level, not just a demographic, but also the psychographic, the behavioral, attitudinal, all of those dimensions of profile. Understanding that is very critical. And then to do that, there are of course, the traditional qual research and sources, which may cost like several hundreds to millions of dollars, but that piece is ripe for disruption. And then there are newer data sources, newer ways, even the web scrape about, or other non-conventional data sources and methods that we talked about, can be employed and used leveraging the AI and analytics to really enrich that HCP customer profile. That's piece number one. Piece number two is really about defining the engagement journeys, not just from the commercial lens, but also bringing in the medical and MSL lens to really say, okay, how do we really want to engage those KOLs in a much more meaningful manner, right? What are the moments, the tactics, what are the ways in which they can be and should be engaged, right? And then the payers and other teams need to come together. So they become our customer, they become our spokesperson rather than we, putting our production strategies out there. And number three is really about leveraging the non-conventional methods, and it could lead to something like knowledge graph, right? To build those deeper profiles and really understanding, HCPs. And I think Sam, you brought up a very great point about various dimensions that you called out, which can be, which can go into your feature engineering, right? And then really saying, okay, when you think about the machine learning models, there are a variety of factors, not just the demographic and profile, but also the types of studies they are participating in, right? The types of clinical trials they are hosting, or the kind of congresses and speaker programs that they are attending and speaking, right? And then their followers also, who is following them. And in the oncology setup, probably, and I'm taking an example as an oncology, academic versus community, or there could be those nuances, or IDNs, the physicians affiliated to IDNs versus the independent group practitioners. Those are other dimensions that can be also brought in. So these three kind of dimensions that will really help we as industry to think through that, how we really want to rethink, take a step back and rethink our KOL identification and KOL engagement strategies, leveraging the AI.
I would add one other thing, and that is we're coming to a point to where the term KOL is under semantic collapse anyway, right? The technology that's available to us today, and the kinds of ways in which it will empower us to change our engagement models will. I mean, think about it right now. Think about your individual pharma company. Think about what percentage of your MSLs ever spent time on a phone or in front of an individual physician, right? And the ones that they're in front of, they receive a high degree of service. Their degree of their practice is shaped effectively by it, and in great ways. But that's just the tip of the pyramid. This technology enables us to move towards a state where we treat every single customer as though they are a KOL, where they receive a high degree of very structured, well-educated, responsive engagement from us. And that's what, honestly, that is what's going to be essential to driving the success of precision medicine going forward. It's not just the diagnostic data. It's not just all of these other pieces that have to be in place. It's about ushering ourselves into a state where our level of support is enabled by technology to be so much more granular than it is today.
And Prasad, that's a great point. And that may be the reason many companies are forming the field teams like thought leaders sitting in between medical and commercial to to bring them together, fill the gap we had in the past from the traditional standpoint to innovate, and techniques and technologies are there to empower them to make these business decisions, but have a one common goal to to support our patients.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
And are there any innovative methods or any newer techniques that you can call out or you can think of which can help us identify the linkages between the big like a national KOLs traditionally people think about that, and then those citizen KOLs, David, that you talked about, or every individual is a KOL, so you can think of them as a KOL in a mini kind of a setup, if you will, within their own span of control, within their own periphery. Yes, they are KOLs. They just are not national, but they are KOLs. So how do you identify those linkages or a strength of those connections between those? Are there any uh, innovative ways and techniques that you can call out?
The foundational data is still the same.
Yes.
There's no magic trick. It's any network is signified ultimately by frequency and nature of the connectivity between the individual points within the network. And that data is there. The problem in the past hasn't been a lack of a good way to describe or model that. The problem in the past has been the sheer volume of data and the cost limitations of the bandwidth needed to actually drive those assessments. That's what that does. It doesn't suddenly become cheap overnight, mind you, because there are a whole range of other costs associated with moving to AI. But I would say it's not about rethinking what constitutes a network. It's about rethinking how we get to that understanding.
And those investments, if you will, right? I mean, it's not cheap, it's not easy. That can be done overnight for sure. But from an investment standpoint, can that investment in those capabilities can be spread across multiple therapeutic areas, multiple brands, and can be leveraged over time so that it doesn't become like a you know big burden for one brand, one launch brand to take on all that efforts and all that cost. Is that something that can be built as a part of this, what we call it as an AI toolkit? This could be one of the tool in that AI toolkit that can be leveraged by the organization throughout the multiple products.
The short answer, Prasad, is yes. Many companies are building the AI toolkit to support different brand needs, thinking more cross-functional, building the frameworks where the rules, the maturity, or the type of data will be very different, but how you execute based on different models, predictive, more innovative models, so you can bring some of the best practices together as part of building the AI toolkit, plus bringing some other techniques or technologies in the mix. Like we all are talking about generative AI, which is so powerful when you are discussing the content, where you can truly offload the burden and the cost on teams and leverage and define various personas and generate content that would be needed for your pre-launch or post-launch activities. So there are techniques. Many companies, based on the size of the company, are already building these AI machine learning toolkit to bring the maturity and bring the synergies across the brand teams, thinking more holistically, because the drivers for rare disease will be very different from the oncology, and having some of these will bring the speed, empower the business. You can have better decision making capability and be more insights driven within the organization.
And that's a nice segue into, the big topic of generative AI. No conversation today will conclude, will end without talking about generative AI. So let me ask, each one of you, from your experience, from your vantage point, right, based on what transformations you have seen in the industry over the last decade, what do you think the role of generative AI would be, and where this is going? And is there a role, or is it a hype? Let me start with you, Sam.
Yeah, so we talked about a lot about like utilization of the classical AI models, like to support product launches. Like as we know that classical AI models, like they are narrowly trained to perform specific tasks. We talked about patient finding and something like that. But then generative AI models, like at least the ones which are kind of underpinning like the Chat GPT or Llama or others, can be trained to perform like many tasks, like at a single time. And a single model can transform how a company trains its employees, conducts its market research, interacts with its customers, and evaluates its compliance risks. So I think while still in its nascency, there are like a lot of applications of Gen AI models in the pharma commercial domain that are being thought through and are getting implemented. And Saket, you mentioned a couple of them. Like we used to think about segment-based HCP and patient messaging, but now with Gen AI models, you can actually make it hyper-personalized at an individual HCP and patient level. And also staying with the content, the topic, like right now you have agencies kind of going through this iterative, like a slow content creation process, but using Gen AI models, you can basically make that entire process more expedited, automated, and efficient, and thus reducing, or maybe not reducing entirely, but the evolution of how much we are being reliant on agencies. And then the last thing is about like right now, the data is kind of scattered and disconnected across multiple different systems. Now, how Gen AI can actually bring all of that data and make it and transform into a more of a digestible, streamlined sort of a situation, and where we can actually get more actionable insights than what we are able to do right now.
Thank you. And David, your thoughts?
I would say I agree with all of the points. I won't really opine on the applications of generative AI. There are thousands of LinkedIn posts that you can read to do the exact same thing I'd be doing. What I will say is the real key here is not so much the application. It's the work that you have to do as an organization to tool up for it. Right? It is not inexpensive to do it at scale and to do it effectively, and it is there are risks that our organizations are only beginning to start to think they understand, and the industry itself isn't adjusting its practices rapidly enough to adopt to where they find themselves now as well. So it is going to continue to be a moving target for a while. And in that environment, you have to be strategic. You can't be reactive. You can't be lured by the bright and shiny stuff. You have to, and you have to have. So there are some pieces that you've got to have in place. You've got good governance. You're going to have to invest in capability. You have been using monks at desks with papyrus. You're now going to have to hire typesetters or teach those monks to typeset now that you've got a Gutenberg press. So all of these things are going to change, and those are the things that are critical to adjust for, because the rest, you can hire somebody else to come out and bring in all of the sexy technology, but you will fail at realizing this promise if you have not invested the time and effort in the strategy, in the governance, and in the capability uplift that you're going to have to think about. And in order to do that, you've got to be smart. You can't try to eat the whole world at once. So that's all I will say on that topic.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, David, Sam, and Saket, for all your great insight and your time this afternoon. On behalf of Indigene, as well as our audience, I'd like to thank all of you for sharing those great insight. And I'm sure the conversation will continue. I see a couple of questions coming up on the chat. Unfortunately, in the interest of time, we may not be able to take it today, but we are more than happy to respond to those questions via email or through other channels. So please stay connected. This is a critical, important topic. There are a lot of products launches are happening across the industry, and I think if we as an industry think through the whole life cycle, especially from T minus 12 to T plus 12, identify those moments of truth or critical decision points where the intervention is required through the data and analytics in order to shape those decisions, in order to shape the launch strategy and timing, and then flawless execution, especially in that first 6 months to 12 months post launch, that will go a long way in terms of attaining the product potential and product revenue. So, with that, I'd like to thank each one of you and have a great day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Have a good day.
Thanks all.
Thanks.